sometimes I get very passionate about politics. And one of my friends said, "You should run for office." No. I should not run for office with my checkered history and questionable background. I'd have to run as a Republican.
Welcome to Inside New York. We are thrilled to have back with us today our co-host, Richard Wesley, and a special guest. She is an actress. She's a comedian. She's a director. She's also got her own podcast. She's got so much going on. We love her. RHONDA Hanson is with us today.
Blacks, Asians, Indians, and Hispanics can all be authentically portrayed by white people.
Yes, she answers to a lot of different wonderful descriptions of people that are doing things, and I couldn't think of a better person to have on at this critical time, because as you remember, the last time you were on the show, I think Trump had just entered office.
It really is sad. I've been reading about these people and worried about the GOP leaders. You know, they're all weirded out. It's like they took a gamble on a one-night stand. Wild one-night stand and woke up with an STD they just can't get rid of.
We're now at the brink of hopefully getting him out of office, but he's doing a lot of damage in the meantime. We are in the midst of an ongoing protest against police brutality. Too many murders of innocent Black men.
And a few Black women as well.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the list of names of Black women who have been killed under these controversial circumstances seems to be growing.
You are right, Richard, and it is a shame. And I think you may know, I actually directed an award-winning piece about Sandra Bland. It was written and starred Connie Winston. It was written by her, and she was actually awarded Best Actress of the United Solo Artists Festival. The name of it is American Captives, Lena Baker and Sandra Bland. And you are absolutely right that our women are being abused and killed by police in the same horrific way that our men are being murdered.
Yes. And it's really so unfortunate because as we talk at this critical time where it seems like so many have died in such a short period of time, and I say died, but were murdered.
It's been like a hanging a day, Joan.
Well, talking about hangings, that's a whole nother subject which we will get to. But yes, with Breonna, it seems as though she's not getting the publicity or, the protests. I know they're all combined, but it's kind of like say her name. It doesn't seem as though she's getting the attention, and they're not getting even the initial arrests.
Well, I'm sorry. No, you go ahead, RHONDA.
Well, I was going to say it's very difficult to get traction on her name and attention on her situation when they actually started out with the autopsy saying that there were no injuries to a woman who was shot 8 times.
8 times.
Absolutely. Yes.
This was an incident. It's currently right now it's in the public consciousness, but it actually happened several months ago. I believe it happened like in February. And it was in the news at the time that it happened, and then it was subsumed by all of the tumult over the onset of COVID-19. It only came back after the international reaction to the video of George Floyd's murder, because suddenly people started putting these things in context. And now more and more people are talking about Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Renaud down in Atlanta, and of course now the Rayshard Brooks situation in also in Atlanta. So it's what I think for me, what we are becoming aware of is a kind of national terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. May as well just come right out and say it, since so much of this involves these police killings, which then are because of this qualified immunity, because it's the police. I feared for my life. Oh, in Breonna Taylor's situation, it was an accident that was an outgrowth of a legitimate police action, which was called, a no warrant raid in the middle of the night. Allegedly at the residence of a suspect who was already in custody. Let's not forget that. At the time that they were leading that raid, information was already across police bands that the suspect had been apprehended. He was in custody in the station. And yet this thing still unfolded. And
well, you're right on point. And the thing about it is that they have a playbook, and the playbook is very, very familiar. In these situations, the first thing they do is lie. That is the first thing. They stall and they lie, and then they smear the victim. And I think we are not falling for the okie doke anymore. I mean, they have been claiming, well, once they stop having picnics around our lynchings and bringing their children and food to the entertainment of killing us, they started with the lie that it was a suicide. And I mean, nobody is falling for that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, you're talking about the hangings now. These
hangings, yes,
hangings that have been going on across
yes,
the country.
Yes.
But they always start out with a lie. And the thing with Rayshard Brooks, I watched the entire 41 minutes. I did not see Bronson kick him, which at this point I'm glad.
Yes.
But Rayshard was so compliant. He was so compliant. I'm not saying the man wasn't drunk, but he was compliant. He was not resisting, and I could see step by step where the second cop who came on was trying to set him up for whatever harm he wanted to do to him.
Yes.
Because the moment he said, "May I give you a breathalyzer test to see if there is alcohol on your breath?" Rayshard said to him, "Of course there's alcohol on my breath. I told you I was drinking." But see, they go through those steps so that they can move to the next step. Rayshard, and each moment of that, I watched 41 minutes of that, and it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. He said, "I don't have to drive. I can walk to my sister's house. It's right up here." They had his license. They had his car. Why did they have to jack him up in handcuffs? There was absolutely no reason for it. Richard, half the time out in these suburbs or in more affluent neighborhoods, they drive these drunk people home.
Yes.
They drive them home.
Absolutely.
And it's even more heartbreaking for me when today I saw a tape of Rayshard talking about probation. We are disproportionately jailed and incarcerated. And he was talking so sensibly and so clearly about the problems around being on probation. He says, "I don't have a mentor. I've got to find work. There is blatant discrimination and prejudice against people who have a record. And I just felt like this was the only way things were going to end for this man if he came into contact with racist police.
I saw some of the tape this past weekend, and I think the thing that disturbed me, and it has disturbed a lot of people, it's not so much the Officer Brunson, the one who's facing the 3 charges. Because he's the one I think he's the one who goes up to the window and knocks on the window.
Bronson was the one who told him to sleep it off in the parking space.
Yes.
Right.
He told him to sleep it off in the parking space, and the other guy came over there and started rattling the cages.
Yes. And
Well,
you really see that. You really see that when he starts, he says, "Follow my finger."
Yes, Rolf.
And did he work that finger?
Yes.
That's what amazed me about it. He stood there. He had that man standing there, follow my finger, and he kept trying to figure out ways.
3 minutes it had to be, because he did it horizontal, then he did it up and down, and then he had him walk in the line, and I'm going, this is a setup.
Yeah. Especially when he would hold the finger in one place and not move it. And there was just something about the way in which that whole process was conducted that just made you completely like, what's going on here? And
no, Richard, you know what's going on. You know they are setting that man up.
Yeah, and Rolf is the one. That's his name.
Rolf,
he is the one who basically intensified the entire confrontation, because Brunson said, "Move the car over." Sleep it off.
Brunson it off over there.
Yeah, if Brunson had been on this on his own, he probably would have just take your behind home, or he would have said, "What's your sister's telephone number? She's going to come here, pick you up, and take you home." He may have given him a summons. He may have given him a summons for driving drunk, for sleeping, having the car, sleeping in the car and all that. He might have got a summons for it, but it would have ended there.
There's no reason for that man to be dead.
Yeah, there's no reason for it.
I think it's important that everyone knows, as I did not know initially, as horrific as it was a 48-minute, it seems, confrontation. Which it was very peaceful, as peaceful as it can get. Rashad was very, I guess you could call him submissive or compliant.
He was compliant.
And certainly would not have killed anybody. So it was never a question of it being a deadly weapon.
But it's legally not a deadly weapon anyway.
Yeah.
It is legally not a deadly weapon, despite the fact that it had already been discharged twice. And he's running and shooting it over his back like he's in a movie or something. He wasn't going to hit anybody with that.
Yeah, because before they knew that there was a tape, a video of it, that encounter was described as he stopped and turned and aimed it at the police officer, and that is why he pulled his gun and shot him. But when you see the video of it, this man is stumbling, bumbling, rumbling, as Walt Frazier might describe it, across this parking lot. And just as Rhonda said, he more or less just like reached behind himself and just, in desperation and everything.
Well, he was also inebriated, so he probably wasn't. He
was so thinking, inebriated, and also,
what am I doing? I just need to get out of here.
That's it.
Like I said, the thing is, what makes it triply, quadruple horrific is not only about the taser not functioning, but also the fact that they knew in that 40 some odd minutes conversation that he was planning to see his daughter to celebrate her birthday. They knew what his plans were, his intent. So this is just so cold and callous that they not only just decided you have no value, you're worthless. They knew they'd be depriving a little girl as well as other members of that family that were, I understand, in walking distance.
None of that mattered.
From that situation. And he probably was trying to run to get to them. It's just, and then as you said, I found out afterwards, as many of us did, that not only did this coward murder Rashad by shooting him in the back, what a coward. And it's also, I think, a crime. It goes against police policy to, believe it or not, there are some policies, to shoot someone in the back. So it's obvious he was not a threat to them. But in addition, after he was shot, this murdering cop kicked him.
Yep.
Kicked him while he was on the ground. And the other one stood on his shoulder. So that just shows a total lack of regard for a human life.
But that total lack of humanity and compassion is systemic. And that was so clear when you saw Chauvin with his hand in his pocket and his knee on George Floyd's neck, in spite of his colleagues saying, don't you think we ought to turn him over? And numerous people in the crowd going, let him up, he's not moving.
He's gonna die. They watched a murder right in front of them. And I understand even in his case, he had asked for some water. Could I just have some water?
He called out for his mother,
Well,
Joan. How horrific was that? How heartbreaking was that? He called out for his dead mother.
At that point, as people have said, because, some people, oh, wow, that's so weak. That's usually the tipping point when you know you're leaving your body. And you never know. I mean, nobody knows really what happens at that point, but if it does happen the way people suspect that, it's like whoever is reaching out to you, he probably saw his mom at that point. And I think we all do when we're totally terrorized, and if you're beaten senseless, that's the image that may come to you. And so he knew he was leaving his body.
Well, I think that's why the video took on such a visceral effect nationally and globally, and why it's come to sort of symbolize all of the pain and suffering that we've had to deal with, and because of the pandemic, which basically has kept all of us in our houses for months now, we all saw it on our television screens, on the news broadcast. There were no other distractions. There were no parties to go to, no sports. We weren't at work. There was like the things that would have caused so many people in this country to kind of dismiss it or miss it altogether weren't there. They were not in place. And so now we had to take a look at it. And suddenly, all of the things that we have said for years about the police department in this country, in these communities, how they function inside our communities, like occupying armies. It wasn't words anymore. Now it was real. Then, of course, when that 75-year-old man up in Buffalo got knocked down and almost killed, from being shoved, and he wasn't black, he was white. Oh, it can happen to us. Well, hello. Suddenly things change. And I want to ask
peaceful
you,
protesters being gassed.
But they have
those are mainly white young people
well,
out there.
abusers.
Many politicians have said
Yeah.
when their children go home and they can give a eyewitness account of the horrors that they've experienced, that the president would basically send out the military against its own people and to spray tear gas and bullets while they're peacefully protesting. That's a total violation of our Constitution. So this is not just gone to murdering innocent Black people boldly on camera. We now seem to be experiencing a rash of hangings of Black men, one of which took place in New York. Did you want to say anything about that, Rhonda?
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's a repetitive nightmare. There has been almost a hanging every day this week, Joan.
Wow.
And it is a classic terror tactic that has been used for centuries on us.
How do we as artists tackle that? How do we address that as artists? I mean, because I know the politicians have their positions, but as artists, how do we deal with that?
As an artist, I am so glad now that I am doing cartoons with Scott Williams. I sent you several of the cartoons that we've been doing. As an artist, we are visually attacking the horror that is going on with the protests and with Trump's horrific handling of a pandemic. And by the way, I do have a spoken word piece about COVID-19 that I wanted to share with your audience.
Very good. And before you lead into that, Rhonda, one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show as well is because I remember early on you getting a scare that you thought you might have COVID-19. And
you're absolutely right. What it actually was dehydration, which was terribly frightening and can be deadly if you don't take care of it. And I was very fortunate that I called someone who helped me get out of it immediately. But up until that point, I actually did think I was going to die. And I am so grateful that I did not have COVID and that I have wonderful people in my life who actually recognized what the symptoms were that I had.
Mm.
So you have a piece that addresses the COVID-19.
Yes, I
pandemic.
do. Thank you. Thank you.
And we're going to see a little of it now.
It's a short spoken word piece called COVID-19.
All right.
COVID-19, that's the name of it. Yes, and thank you so much. COVID-19 is stealth as what? Snatching, gurgling babies, invincible teens, 30, 40, and 50s with no underlying conditions. Gathering nursing home bodies in both hands just because it can. Come at you from surfaces, thin air, asymptomatic mother truckers not wearing a mask, mutating for the fun of it. Capricious souvenirs remind survivors you may never really be free of corona. Never free to whisper, shake hands, hug, or laugh with abandon. Abandon spontaneous reaction. Caution is your only friend and will betray you at whim. Thank you.
Thank you. That's so wonderful.
I love your audience and thank you for having me. I really love you and I adore Richard Wesley and this has been just a fabulous experience for me. And thank you for always thinking of me to share whatever I'm doing with your audience. And we'll work on Lie Baby Lie, my one-woman show.
Yes.
And we have had a long association, which I'm so proud of. Thank you so much, Joan.
So glad that we
You're
were able
welcome.
to reconnect with you. You know, this is just wonderful. It
Bye,
really
Great
Richard.
seeing
I
you,
love
Rhonda.
and make sure we're gonna, you know, obviously put up that video, and don't forget to remind your followers to subscribe, because you'll see the extended version of this program on our YouTube channel. We can only air 28 minutes on our TV show, but if you want to see the whole interview and all of the great highlights and performances, you got to tune into our YouTube channel.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Rhonda.
Have a great
Take
day
care
and a
now.
great show.
Thank
You're
you.
doing something tonight, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm doing storytelling tonight.
All right. I can never keep up with the list. It's just ongoing, and you had a documentary. We didn't even talk about that, but
Next time.
next time.
Next
That's
time.
right. You're not a stranger.
Okay.
Drop in anytime.
Thank you.